Hey, what's happening, family? Welcome to Every Nation Bryanston Online. My name is Siviwe, and it is always a privilege to be with you. Whether you're watching it on Sunday or maybe during the week on YouTube, I hope this Sunday service will be a blessing to you. Now, today, before we actually continue with our Proverbs series, I want to let you know about a few things. First one is we're open. We are so open. Right now, as you're watching this online and from the comfort of your home, we have people back in our circle venue meeting physically. If you feel comfortable and you feel ready to join us in our in-person gatherings, you can register today for next Sunday. However, we are still going to be here. You at home watching this are so important to us, and we would love to get the word out to you. So if you're going to still be at home, we will still meet you here every single week. Then on the 16th of October, we have our men's outing. This is going to be from 9 until 12. We're just going to get together with a whole bunch of men. If you want to bring a friend, you can as well. We're going to hang out, do a few things together, and just get to connect and have a bit of fun as well. So sign up for our men's outing, 16th of October, 9 to 12. Sign up today. Links are provided below this video. And ladies, just to let you know, on the 30th of October, there'll be a ladies outing for you too as well. And we will give you more information on that as the weeks come. Lastly, I want to let you know that on the 31st of October, which is a Sunday, we are going to be having baptisms. I'm so excited about this, and I want to encourage you that if you have any questions about baptisms or you actually want to be baptized, sign up today. This is such an integral part of the New Testament church as we read through the Gospels and Paul's letters. This is an essential part of us identifying with Christ and walking in his will and his way. So do sign up today for baptism, and we will be in touch with you to help you take your next step. Now, with that being said, we are moving into our Proverbs series, and today my good friend Sarah Bryce is going to be preaching Proverbs about money and pretense. Take your word out, take your journal out, and maybe a good cup of coffee as well, and let's get to work.
Hi guys, it's good to be with you today. We're continuing on in our series in Proverbs, and today we're going to be talking about money and pretense. I don't know how many of you have been reading the proverb that corresponds with the day of the month, as Siv was encouraging us to do. If you haven't been, do it. It's been really good to dig back into the book of Proverbs. But as I've been doing so, I've realized that Proverbs is littered with verses about money. And while it might not always use that term, we'll often see a lot more talk about wealth or prosperity or poverty, kind of these extremes on the money spectrum. But as you dig in and as you keep reading, pay attention, because I'm realizing it is just littered with verses about money. I want to just start off by throwing a few out there. I honestly just kind of picked some at random. So let's just kind of let these sink in. Some of the proverbs that we come across about money. Proverbs 10 verse 4 says, "Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth." Proverbs 14:23 says, "All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty." Proverbs 10:15 says, "The wealth of the rich is their powerful fortress. The poverty of the poor reduces them to rubble." I'm going to read a couple more. I told you it's littered. Proverbs 13 verse 4 says, "Lazy people want much, but get little. But those who work hard will prosper." And Proverbs 11:25 says, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." And like I said, this is just some that I chose. In general, in Proverbs, when we hear talk of prosperity or wealth, it's often referred to as the result of following the wise way. Sometimes it's around admonishing the wealthy to be generous and compassionate to the poor. And then some Proverbs are actually acknowledging that wealth isn't always a good thing in and of itself, but that in some circumstances, poverty might actually be better. The language around poverty in Proverbs is a little more nuanced than that of prosperity or wealth. It makes very clear that if possible, poverty should be avoided. Sometimes it's just making sympathetic observations about the poor. And then other times it almost seems as if the poor are being blamed for their poverty. And while I think we all can recognize that there is some truth in that laziness, folly, drunkenness can definitely at times lead to poverty, I think we all can recognize that there are numerous things that cause poverty and lead to poverty, and many times those things are completely outside of the control of the person who is experiencing the poverty. And similarly, on the opposite side, while we can recognize that hard work and being wise and prudent can definitely at times lead to wealth, I think we all know people for whom that hasn't been true. And also, I think we all probably know people or can think of people who seemingly haven't worked very hard at all, who maybe don't represent much righteous or wise living, and yet somehow they still are experiencing a lot of wealth in their life. So I think Siv said it quite well. It was the first Sunday that we were starting this series, and he said that Proverbs is not a book of promises, but of probabilities. And a theologian by the name of Marcus Borg said, it's a book filled with a lot of what we call conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom, he says, is at the heart of every culture and almost every subculture. It is cultural or community wisdom. It's what everybody knows, or at least should know. And within conventional wisdom, both within religious and secular contexts, there's often this inherent notion, and we see this throughout Proverbs, where basically we see rewards for right living. If you behave this way, this will happen. If you follow this path, life will work out for you in this way. I was thinking about this and reflecting on some time I recently spent with my grandmother. I don't know how many of you have elderly people in your lives, whether it's friends or family members, but I have a 91-year-old grandma. She is my mom's mom. She's my only remaining grandparent, the only great grandparent of our daughters. And I was able to see her when we were in the States recently. And honestly, one of my greater fears during the last 2 years that we weren't able to make it home because of COVID was that my grandma might pass during that time and that I wouldn't be able to see her or spend time with her before she did. But we got to spend really beautiful time with her while we were home. And although her body is beginning to fail her, her mind is fully intact, and sitting and chatting with her is just so rich and so enjoyable. But I was thinking about Proverbs in light of time with my grandma. My grandma has so much wisdom. She has lived so much life. She has so much to offer. And yet there's times that I could find her saying things that I'm like, Grandma, I'm not sure it's that cut and dry. Things like, well, so-and-so, if she just wouldn't have done that, then that wouldn't have happened. And I feel like sometimes Proverbs can feel a little bit like that. So while we can recognize that Proverbs is not a book of guaranteed promises for our lives, we can also acknowledge that conventional wisdom, including what we find in the book of Proverbs, it contains truths that we really couldn't live without. We can't live together as humans in groups without taken for granted expectations about how we should behave as humans. Consider just a made-up proverb like, stop at stop signs, lest you die. I think we all can recognize that you might stop at a stop sign and still get hit by a car and die. But yet, we can also equally acknowledge that if we all abide by that rule, the chances of dying in a car accident, if we're stopped at a stop sign, are much less likely than if we just drove through it. So, what do we do with the nuance? What do we do with the generally true, but not always true that we find throughout Proverbs? And today, specifically thinking about it in light of money. And I think as followers of Jesus, as followers of the way I make sense of the nuance is to look to Jesus, Lady Wisdom herself embodied in human flesh. So I want to read some words from Jesus about money. I'm going to read from Matthew 6, verses 19 through 24. This is from Jesus' famous Sermon on the Mount, his inaugural address, if you will. And he says this: "Don't keep hoarding for yourselves earthly treasures that can be stolen by thieves. Material wealth eventually rusts, decays, and loses its value. Instead, stockpile heavenly treasures for yourselves that cannot be stolen and will never rust, decay, or lose their value. For your heart will always pursue what you esteem as your treasure. The eyes of your spirit allow revelation light to enter into your being. If your heart is unclouded, the light floods in. But if your eyes are focused on money, the light cannot penetrate, and darkness takes its place. How profound will be the darkness within you if the light of truth cannot enter? How could you worship two gods at the same time? You will have to hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't worship the true God while enslaved to the god of money." This word money here, it was originally left as the untranslated Aramaic word mammon. This word mammon, with a capital M, mind you, it means the idolatry of material riches or an all-consuming pursuit of wealth. There were medieval theologians who considered mammon to be the demon of greed, and it was also known as the Greek seductive god of riches. Generally, words like mammon that remain untranslated, they're usually names. And so early Christians maybe concluded that Jesus wasn't just talking about a thing, money, but maybe this quasi-personal, this nameable power that has a will in the world in opposition to the will of God. The demonic force of mammon has distorted human affairs throughout history and has ultimately served to turn persons into things and to distort God's good creation into an immaterial world. This is how things like chattel slavery and apartheid happen. We turn persons into things unto the service of mammon. According to the author and speaker Andy Crouch, he says that this form of power that money gives us, this mammon power, it's unlike any other for a few reasons. And for my economist friends, some of this might sound a bit basic, but he says that the reason that money gives us a type of power unlike any other is for three main reasons. One, money can be exchanged for other things. It can be used whenever and for whatever we want. So think about other forms of power. For instance, I have a form of power as the mother of my daughters. I can ask them and tell them to do things. I have a bit of authority and power over them. But I can't use that same power anywhere, wherever, and for whatever I want. If I try to use that same power, for instance, with my husband, we might get into some arguments. He'll say, "Don't treat me like a child," right? But money can be used, that form of power can be used whenever and for whatever we want. The second thing is it's countable. We can actually know exactly how much power we have in money because we can count it. And this is unlike other forms of power. Most other forms of power, the amount of power you have is a little bit, I don't know. I know I have a little more power maybe than that person, but you can't count it and quantify it in the exact same way. And the third reason he says is money is storable. We can actually save this power, this form of power that we have in money. We can save and we can use it later at a time of our choosing. I'm grateful that other forms of power, we can't do this. For instance, I was thinking of the American President Donald Trump. I'm actually glad that he couldn't store the power that he had as president and choose to use it at a later time when he was not reelected as president. You hear what I'm saying? So it's exchangeable. We can use it for whatever, whenever we want. It's countable. We can know exactly how much we have, and it's storable. We can store up the power, save it, use it at a later time. And Andy Crouch says that all of these things add up to form an impersonal power that doesn't require dependence on anyone or anything else. It is a power greater than any other in the world, and it serves as the most direct rival to God in human affairs. That's intense. He said he believes that it serves as the most direct rival to God in human affairs. Mammon, this demonic force of greed, it has done disastrous harm throughout history to both our fellow neighbors and to the world that we've been given to steward. But it also enslaves us personally. It enslaves us and keeps us trapped in a cycle of attempting to purchase our identities, our happiness, our significance, and it creates this insatiable need to do so. It's the infamous, the grass is always greener, right? If I could just have that home or that job or those things or could take that holiday, then I'd be happy and then things would be better. And we subconsciously look at those around us for confirmation, for affirmation of our social and economic status. Where in the past, we might have only been aware of our immediate neighbors or maybe our direct family members. Like we might have only known about their monetary status, but now we're constantly bombarded with wealth signals on radio and television and internet and social media. It's everywhere. And even though we know that a lot of this is not true or not fully true, we so easily buy into what we're being sold and what's being presented to us. Brad Klontz, he's a financial psychologist. He says that when it comes to money, our animal brains kick in. We start comparing ourselves to those around us. So whereas a peacock would fluff his feathers and a lion would flaunt his mane, we humans, we flaunt our homes, our cars, our clothes, our jewelry, and our material possessions. For so many of us, what we buy and what we have become so entangled with who we are, or at least what we want to appear true of who we are. And this is where pretense enters into the mix. I said we were going to talk about money and pretense today. Mammon and pretense, they really enjoy one another's company. Pretense is defined as the attempt to make something that is not the case, the attempt to make something that is not true appear true. Guys, we live surrounded by and shrouded in pretense. And mammon, this seductive god of riches and material things, it has a heyday off of all of our faking and attempts to keep up with those around us. I just want to poll the audience. You're online, so I can't really see your hands, but how many of you have purchased, let's say, maybe gym clothes, and you wear said gym clothes and you feel amazing in said gym clothes and you go run your errands in those gym clothes and you love what your gym clothes are saying to the people that you encounter, but you actually haven't been to the gym more than like twice in the past year? I'm guilty. I'm so guilty. And I'm making a cheeky example here. But this is pretense. This is pretense. And if mammon is this capital M mammon, if it is this quasi-personal, nameable, demonic force of greed, then our pretense is her food. We feed and fuel the destructive power of mammon with our pretense. We get in vicious cycles of spending, of desiring more and more and more in order to keep up with those around us, trying to convince both ourselves and others of who we are, to the point that sometimes I think we don't even know who we are anymore. Jesus had some words to say about pretense, and I want to caveat here and acknowledge that pretense can show up in many areas of our lives, not just with money. There can be emotional pretense, right? It's, hey, how you doing? You're like, good, yeah, I'm good. Everything's great. When really you are riddled with grief and anxiety and depression. There can be religious pretense. The verses that I'm about to read to us now, Jesus is actually speaking to the Pharisees about their religious pretense, of their putting on a show. But also think of the times, I know for me, where you're doubting things in your faith and you're questioning, but you don't want to tell anyone. And so you just play the part and you act like everything's fine. So I want to acknowledge that pretense can take shape in so many ways. Today, we're looking at it specifically in regards to money. And while Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees in this passage about their religious pretense, I think there's a lot that we can glean from this in regards to money and what we're talking about today. So in Matthew 23, verses 25 through 26, Jesus says, "Hypocrites, for you are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and self-indulgence. You blind Pharisee, first wash the inside of the cup and the dish, and then the outside will become clean also." I love Jesus. I love Jesus so much. In Proverbs, there's a verse that kind of hits on this as well. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5 says, "The real motives come from deep within a person, as from deep waters. But a discerning person is able to draw them up and expose them." Deep in this verse here is not referring to profound. It's rather referring to a well whose waters are far beneath the surface of the ground, and you have to use a long rope and a bucket to pull up the water to the surface. Faking it, trying to keep up with others, seeking the approval and affirmation of others has become so culturally normal that it takes intentional, conscious, deliberate digging with discernment to try to figure out what's underneath the surface and why we pretend as we do. And I was wrestling with this as I was preparing this message. Like, why do we do this? Why do we pretend as we do as humans? And I think it's because that we were made to have someone outside of ourselves tell us who we are. We were made for that. We desire it from birth. A baby, when it's born, does not know itself as a separate entity from its mother until it's around 6 or 7 months old. They literally do not know who they are without their mother's presence and being with them. And then you think of young children. We have an almost 4-year-old and a 6.5-year-old. You guys, if I told you the number of times in a day that I hear, "Mommy, look at this, Mommy, look at this," and it could be any number of things, but they just want to hear me say, like, "Oh, you're amazing. You did great." They want me to see them and affirm them. They need me to speak to them who they are. We are made to have someone outside of ourselves tell us who we are. And the marketing industry knows this, and it has capitalized off of it. Phil Knight, he was the former CEO of Nike. He said this. He said, "For years, we thought of ourselves as a production-oriented company, meaning we put all of our emphasis on designing and manufacturing shoes. But now we understand that the most important thing we do is market those shoes." He said, "Our mission is to nurture relevant emotional ties between the Nike brand and the consumer." That's crazy. He said our mission is to nurture relevant emotional ties between the Nike brand and the consumer. So Nike isn't just selling us shoes, just like Apple isn't selling us just phones and computers. They are selling us the logos that go on those items. And then we feel these emotional ties when we see that Nike swoosh or that infamous Apple symbol. We associate those symbols with qualities we want for ourselves and that we want to represent to the world around us. And then we end up paying lots of money to buy them. Ultimately, these companies aren't just in the tech industry or aren't just in the apparel business. They are in the identity business. Pastor and consultant Skye Jatani, in reflecting on this, he says, "As we wander the mall or scroll online, We aren't simply searching for a coat, a cell phone, or a backpack. We're searching for ourselves. In a consumer society, shopping is a sacred activity. It plays a role in our lives that once only belonged to religion, the power to give us meaning and form identity. Guys, we are made to have someone outside of ourselves tell us who we are. And I am convinced that our souls will shrink or expand in light of what we set our affection on and from whom and what we're seeking our identity and significance. Joel and I purchased our first home about 2 years ago now. At the time, we'd been married 14 years. We had never owned a home. We had always rented. And we really felt ready to have a space that was ours, that we could really make our own. And we really felt like God was inviting us to put down roots in South Africa and really choose to make South Africa home. So we bought the house and we were going to do what we thought were some minor renovations, which turned into some pretty massive renovations, as projects like that tend to do. So we started. It was supposed to be about 4 months. There was some added time because of additional renovation things, but also we lost 3 months of time because of COVID during the hard lockdown and no construction could take place. So it ended up being a 9-10 month process. And you guys, I am not exaggerating when I say I felt my soul withering and shriveling during this period of time. I was intricately involved in the process. I had been so excited to create a space that would be ours. And I had Pinterest boards and I was sourcing things and I was very involved. Joel and I are both very frugal and prudent with our spending. So I felt this need to make every cent count. And I'm a perfectionist, so I wanted things done perfectly. And it all just became so much. And I realized a couple things in this process. One, I realized that I felt like this house was a reflection of me. If it wasn't perfect, then I had failed. If we didn't hit the nail on the head with budget, then I completely screwed up. If workers in the home weren't doing things the way I thought they were done, then all felt lost. And it really was like a process in digging into, where do I find my identity? It cannot be in this home. But I also realized another thing, and I feel so convinced of this, and it's what Jesus was getting at in his Sermon on the Mount. Finite material things will never, ever be able to satisfy or define us, because our identity and significance can only come from the infinite one who knit us and formed us in our mother's womb, who knows our deepest, truest, most inward parts. Finite things can never satisfy us. Our souls will shrink or expand in light of where we're setting our affection and seeking our identity. We might try as humans to use money to buy our meaning, to buy our identity, our significance. But Jesus, only Jesus was able to pay that high a price. And it is only in him that we live and breathe and move and have our being. So, where do we go from here? I don't think money or pretense are going anywhere anytime soon. We live in a capitalistic economy. We live in a consumer-driven society. Money and pretense are good buddies. The lure of pretense and money will always be there. So what do we do? I first want to acknowledge that I don't think Jesus was saying that money in and of itself is bad, or that having money in and of itself is bad. I think what he was saying, and quite strongly, is that serving money, becoming a slave to money, comparing ourselves to others in light of their finances or material things, attempting to purchase our identity and significance with our money, using our money in ways that is harmful to those around us or to the world we've been given to steward, that doesn't seek the flourishing of others. This is what Jesus has a massive problem with. Money has extreme power, and we talked a lot about the harm and the evil power that money can have and the damage that it has done in the world and lives. but it can also be used for beautiful, redemptive good in our lives and the world around us. Jesus was supported financially by friends and people with money, and I might add that a number of them were wealthy women. So the question becomes, I think, this is where I would encourage you, take some notes, reflect on these things over the coming week, spend time journaling and digging deep, digging into that deep well of your motives. The question becomes, are we fixated or are we liberated in regards to money? Are we fixated or liberated? Is money our God, or is God God of our money? Does our lack or abundance of money dictate to us how to live, or does God tell us how to live regardless of our lack or abundance? When I was a university student studying, I was paying for my education. I had taken out a number of loans, but I still had an amount each month that was due to the university. And I've told you guys before, I was actually living with a family at our church at the time. I had a bedroom in their house. And basically I paid my room and board by cleaning their house for them. And then I would take on little side jobs. I would dip into the tiny bit of savings that I had, but that was basically how I made it through those years. I was disciplined, I was frugal, I didn't buy unnecessary things, I didn't spend frivolously, and there was one day in particular that I was going to a shop to get some essential toiletries and things. I had a list, I knew exactly what I needed, I knew what my budget was, and I walk into this store. It was springtime, so it was like rainy season, and as stores do, you walk in, and of course they have out on display the seasonal things that you obviously must need for that time of year. So there happened to be a display of umbrellas. I didn't have an umbrella, so they caught my eye, and I'm thinking of and reflecting on the times that I'd parked my car in the car park and walked up to campus and would get wet because I didn't have an umbrella. And I see this one in particular that, I don't know, had a really pretty print on it, and it caught my eye, and it was one of those like, that just makes me feel happy looking at that. So I pick it up and I'm looking at it, and it really didn't cost that much in the big scheme of things, but I then set it down, I go on my way, I finish my shopping. And as I'm shopping, I keep feeling this like Holy Spirit stir inside that's like, go buy the umbrella. And I'm like, no, get behind me, Satan. I don't have money for the umbrella. But I keep feeling it. And I felt so convicted by God. I felt so convicted that He was like, Sarah, don't you trust me? Don't you trust that I love you and have good intentions for you? I want you to be free in your money. Go buy the umbrella. And so I did. And I'm not sharing this example to try to say like, oh, be frivolous and foolish with your money. I think there's times we have things in our hands or trolley that we need to listen to that same check of Holy Spirit that's going, put that thing back. You don't need to buy it. But my point is that we can be just as fixated on money and our lack as we are in our abundance. It can control us at either spectrum. And directly after that bit where Jesus is talking about not being able to serve God and mammon, a number of verses down, that's where he starts talking about, don't worry about what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear. Don't you see the lilies of the field? We can be just as fixated on money and our lack as we are in our abundance. So reflect on this week. Are we gripped by money? Are we fixated on it and the power that we have from it or think we can have from it? Or are we gripped by God and therefore liberated from the tyranny of money's control over our lives? And I finally just want to leave us with some really practical things that I think we can do to take back some of the power from this demonic force of greed, mammon. Some things that we can do to take back some of that power from our lives and in the world around us. And the first, it's so seemingly simple, but it's massive to just break the hold of money in our lives, and it's generosity. It's giving. It's being free and generous with our money. It releases the control of money in our lives. Jesus says, when you have done it unto the least of these, you have done it unto me. Our giving, our generosity, our care for others, it is also an act of love and service to Jesus himself. The second thing is choosing to prioritize people in our purchases, transactions, investments, or business decisions. We talked about how mammon is this impersonal type of power. It cuts off dependence from others, and we can end up treating people like things. So it's asking ourselves before we make a purchase or a business transaction or make an investment, what will this do to strengthen relationships, to create capacity for love and dignity and respect for others, to bring flourishing into the world and lives around me. And if it doesn't do those things, we should stop and think long and hard before we proceed. Third, this is one that I actually took from John Mark Comer, and he's the one who Joel referenced a lot when we talked about Sabbath and rest. He wrote the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and he talks about that when his family does their weekly Sabbath day, one of the things they rest from is spending. All spending, all shopping. They don't even talk about things they'd like to buy. It's kind of intense, but this is arguably simple, but like really dramatic form of resistance to the power of mammon in our lives, to just say one day a week, I'm not engaging this thing. The next one, I don't know, it tweaks me, it rubs me weird. I'll see how it sits with you guys. But this was, Andy Crouch recommended this one. He said, transparency. He said, within trusted relationships, be transparent about your income, your assets, your savings, and your giving. Secrecy around our money, he says, is a sign of the grip that money has on us. Secrecy around our money is a sign of the grip that money has on us. And he says that transparency should be normal in our Christian communities around our money. That we have people who can challenge us and speak into where our money is going and how we're using it. That one is hard for me, but I think it's a good one to sit with. The next one, and this was a really big one for me during and after our house renovation process, was silencing the noise of social media. It is a cesspool of comparison. It is comparison all the time, and comparison is the thief of joy. It steals joy from us. So fast from it entirely if you need to, or unfollow people or accounts that cause you to compare yourself to others or that fuel an insatiable need for more. And last but not least, and this is one that I think, guys, we will spend our entire lives working at, but it's to consciously pursue hearts that are branded by Jesus. We talked about the emotional ties to the Nike swoosh symbol and the Apple symbol. Like, what if our highest aim was to have hearts that are branded by Jesus? That his name, that his brand would be the thing we are most consumed by wearing, that's what we're defined by, and that's what we reflect to the world around us. Galatians 3, verses 26 through 27 says, "For you are all children of God through faith in Jesus Christ, and all who have been united with Christ in baptism have put on Christ, like putting on new clothes." I read a book about a year ago now. It's called Wearing God by a lady named Lauren Winner. And the book is looking at a whole number of analogies for God that we find in the Bible that often go overlooked. One of them was clothing. So I want to read a quote from her from this book. Close your eyes if you want to. Just let this soak in. She says, "I become professional or hip, depending on what I'm wearing. I feel different when I'm wearing different clothes. I act different. I let my business suits and my vintage shirts remake me in their image. If to change clothes can be to change one's sense of self, to change one's way of being in the world, then what is it to put on Christ? Are we daily, as sure as we put on our clothes in the morning, putting on Christ the Lord? I want to let Jesus affect the way I move, the way I interact, the way I shape affection, the means by which I negotiate others' opinions of me, as well as the way in which I perceive my own self." Can you imagine if our highest aim and greatest ambition was to be like him, to wear him, to be branded by him, and that we would reflect him to the world around us above all else? I want to close with Proverbs 3, verse 13 through 15. It says, "To gain the riches of wisdom is far greater than gaining the wealth of the world. As wisdom increases, a great treasure is imparted, greater than many bars of refined gold. It is a more valuable commodity than gold or gemstones, for there is nothing you could desire that compares with her." Let's pray. Jesus, we want our hearts to be branded by you. We want you to be our highest aim, the greatest thing we could ever reflect or project to the world around us. Would you give us discernment and wisdom to really dig deep and see where money, where mammon has taken grip and root in our hearts and lives? Would you free us so that we can be those who free the world and others around us from its grip? We love you, Jesus. We want to be like you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Guys, I really hope this message was meaningful for you. I hope it gave you some things to reflect on and chew on over the week. If you'd like to join a Connect group, we'd love to get you plugged in. If you're watching live, you can click on the link in the chat box. If you're watching on YouTube, there'll be a link down below. But yeah, that's just where we journey together in smaller groups. So if you want to join a Connect group, please let us know. Also, we have a Pathways course. This is our Next Steps course, we call it. It meets every Sunday online. It's awesome. If you're wanting to know, what are my next steps in the faith, and just have some questions, Pathways is a great place to flesh that out. So same, there should be a link on the side if you're watching Sunday at 10. Otherwise, there's a link down below if you're watching on YouTube. So let us know and we'll be in touch. As we always do, I want to leave you with our blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May his kingdom come in and through you, and may he give you peace.
From broken to whole, stained to whiter than snow, his grace changes everything. From darkness to light, from death into life, his grace changes everything. From broken to whole, stained to whiter than snow, his grace changes everything. His grace changes everything. There's no sin too great, there's no pain too deep. The cross declares it is done. There's no shame too real that his love won't heal. Forever the victory is won. He has broken the chains, he has conquered the grave. His grace changes everything. By the power of his blood, we are daughters and sons. His grace changes everything. Only by his grace changes everything. Come on. There's no sin too great, there's no pain too deep. The cross declares it is done. There's no shame too real that his love won't heal. Forever the victory is won. There's no sin too great, there's no pain too deep. The cross declares it is done. I'm no longer the same, Lord. You make me new. I'm brand new in you. Yeah. The chains of my past are shattered for all eternity. And it is finished. Your work at the cross, it is finished. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you.
It is finished. It is finished. The victory is won. It is finished. It is finished. The victory is won.
Doesn't matter what the enemy tries to tell you, it is finished.
It is finished. It is finished. The victory is won.
Chains forever broken, no longer enslaved. It is finished.
It is finished.
The work at the cross finished it all.
It is finished. The victory is won.
Now I stand victorious.